Hi, George Durkee again with the second video of the series, Learning to Use ArcGIS Pro. And this is the shortened course just for this last week. Now you remember in the last video we started up Arc Pro and downloaded the data for the Northridge quake, and then also connected the folders so they show up under your project folder. So if you haven't already, take a look at that. Check your folders. Notice that you've got your ESRI training folder there, the Pro Start class, and so on, anyway, down finally to the Northridge geodatabase. And if you've never used a geodatabase before, they're a capsule, essentially, that holds all of your data, and it'll hold a whole bunch of different types of data. And each, in this particular case, each is called a feature class, and it's identified whether it's a point, you can see the little points there, or a polygon, or raster, etc. Anyway, that's how you identify them, just with the little icon there. And in addition, when you set up a project, it sets up a default geodatabase, and that's where you can put in particular data that you might create or need to use later and put in there. And we're going to, in this exercise, we're going to create a couple of feature classes that we'll later edit as part of this series of lessons. And so let's do that first. We'll make a couple of feature classes here. So you hover over the default GDB, right click, and go down to New, and then you get a whole bunch of types that you can create, but we're going to create a feature class. And then name, we'll call this one, let's call this one Emergency Shelters. And then you give it the alias that'll show up. Now, there's actually a database of emergency shelters that's online, but it's actually, it's compiled by the Red Cross and quite often doesn't work. And we want it to be a point type, and then let's go to next, because we're going to add a couple of fields here. So let's add we're not going to get too complicated here, so let's add a label field. It'll be text, and let's also add pets. Well, no, let's not get too carried away. Let's call it capacity, and so that'll be a number field. And notice there's a drop down here, and so that'll be a short integer, and so that's just a number without decimal points. And later on, I will show you in the written material where you can learn about the field data types, just so you know what all the choices are. And we could actually finish right here, but I'll just show you. The rest is choosing a coordinate system, and let's just keep it in Web Mercator. We may want to upload this later to the web, so this will work. So go ahead to next, and just accept the defaults, and finish. And so now we'll do one more, maybe two more. So let's go again to New and Feature Class. And let's call this one Damage Zone. So this will be a polygon that we're going to draw a boundary around. And I just made this up just so we can learn about polygons and how to edit them. We'll go to next. And let's just give this a label. We'll call this label. And let's just call that there. We'll just finish. And we'll also do a line feature class. So let's, once again, new feature class, and we'll call this evac route, evacuation route. And some of you are taking my class in a week on emergency incident mapping, so you'll learn more about this and public information maps. So we made this a line type of feature class, and we'll go next. And once again, we'll do label. And you can also add things like some things that are relevant to it, like distance and things like that, or number of lanes or whatever. But for our purposes, let's just go with that. And let's also finish. Oops. So now we've made 3, as you can see, damage zones, emergency shelters, and evac routes. And notice that that's line, points, and polygon there. So now let's look at the rest here. We'll actually bring in some of our data here. And there's a couple of ways you can do this. So for instance, if we wanted to bring in roads, we'd right click and you have the choice, add to new map, global scene, or local scene. But the other way to do this is to go over here to map, or I'm sorry, insert, and under new map, it shows you the types of maps you can create. So in this case, it'll be a 2D map, but you also have the choice of a global scene. So for instance, if you had data from a huge area, like say the entire US, and you wanted to show it as a globe, then you'd use global scene. But if you have local 3D imagery that and data that you want to put in, you'd use local scene. So if you want to show buildings, and in the case of the Northridge earthquake, it shows point data of earthquake locations beneath the surface. So you'd use a local scene for that, but we're just going to go to new map, and it'll create a tab for us. And incidentally, this is an advantage of ArcGIS Pro over desktop, because you can have a whole series of tabs here. So we can have a 2D, we can have a 3D, and you can have a series of layouts, which is really a great thing, because in desktop 10 and before, if you did a new layout, you'd actually have to start a new project, or there were some workarounds. You'd basically lose your old layout, and then you'd have to start a new one. So anyway, this is actually a major advantage. So now we've got our map, and it gave us a default ESRI map, the topographic map, and we can change that later, but we may not want to. So now we go to roads. Let's put that in, and I right click and add to current map. And notice how it zooms in on the roads for the area around Northridge and LA. And let's add major faults. Same thing, add to current map. And let's add the epicenter, epicenter of the big Northridge quake. And I think that's enough for the moment. Again, we're just demoing some tools and how to use labels and editing and symbology. So we'll just keep it with that for the moment. So of course the idea of a map is to be able to show data in a way that's almost or as close to self-explanatory as you can get with a map. So you want people to be able to look at the map, and you have legends, of course, which show what the symbols stand for. But if you're designing a great map, people can usually tell what the symbology is without even looking at the legend. So the first thing, let's change the epicenter. There's only one point here, and that doesn't show up all that well. So what you do is you click on the symbol, and then your symbology comes up. Make sure it's locked into place. And so you've got a couple of choices. You've got a gallery, and you've got properties of the symbol you choose. So in our case, we're going to go to gallery, and well, let's just look for something that might work here as a symbol for an earthquake. I'm going to choose square 4 here. Well, let's go triangle 5. It's got a little center dot on it. And point of that is it shows up a little bit better. Let's go to properties and let's make it a little bigger. Let's take it up to 14 points, say, and apply. Now there's also an option here of halo, and we'll use that later for labels. A halo allows you to put just a little bit of a background on that, or a border of a different color, and that's very useful for multicolored backgrounds, topographic maps, for instance, where your symbol, depending on where it's located, might not be quite as visible. So if you put a halo on it, you've got a couple of different colors that'll show the contrast a little better. But we won't do that now. Okay, let's go to major faults, and again here, we'll go to the gallery. I'm not quite sure what we'd want to do here. Let's just go with a black line. So we'll stick with just a black line. So that means all we're going to do here is within the properties, choose black, and maybe take it up to 2 points. So much of that might be a little overdone, but we're not going to make a great art level. And a lot of this too is just getting your data in place, getting a feel for what it looks like, and then when we go to layout, then we'll start trying to get better symbology here. But so we're just establishing the location of everything for the moment and just getting some basic symbols in. Now for roads, we'll go back to the symbol set, go back to the gallery, and notice right here at the top we have roads. Various types for various types of roads, and I'm going to choose major roads here because they stand out pretty good. And notice that you could also choose black lines or even gray them up a little bit for roads, but then you'd have a little trouble pulling them out from among the fault lines here. So you want something that contrasts with that. But again, you might want to fiddle around. So let's try, that works okay too. And then maybe you don't need them that thick. Let's go down. Okay, and then apply. Yeah, that's good. Okay, now we're going to look a little bit at labeling. So before you label, we're going to label the roads. We want to look at the attribute table, because from the attribute table you can choose a field that would make sense to label it. And so, for instance, here's highway name, and so that probably makes sense. We'd want to label it with the highway name. Most roads on most databases are classified by whether they're dirt or state highway or freeway, and unfortunately that's not done here, because then I could show you how to symbolize by the road type. But we'll just stick with this. It's not great, but it'll just show you how to do it. Okay, so when we label, we want to choose highway name. So let's get rid of that. We have highway name, and just go ahead and click label. And notice that the highway name comes up, but it's kind of, let's zoom in here. There we go, that's a little better. So now for roads, let's take a look at placement. So when you click here, you can either do it from here, but if you want to get a little more detail here, you click here in the lower right and bring up label class, and for roads, and remember, whatever you've highlighted over here is what your toolbars and your tool pane over here is going to act on. So you have some choices, and this is another thing you can fool around with. So you have street placement, street address, contour placement, river placement. Let's try street and see what happens. See, notice it curves a little bit around the road here. US Highway 101 curves right around it. And there's a whole bunch of other adjustments you can make here. And for the moment, we're not going to fool around with them. This is just a basic intro here. And there's more here where you can stack your labels, reduce size for various reasons, and you can remove duplicates if they're a certain distance. So at the moment it's set for do not remove, but let's remove all within a fixed distance. And you can fool around with the distance here to see if that's too close or too far away for duplicates. And then you can start working on the symbol for the road. So right now we just have straight out type here, the font style and the size and so on. But we'll add that halo I was talking about earlier. So notice that it's black on the background there. So let's add just a polygon symbol. It shows white, but what we're going to do is give it a little bit of yellow for the background. And yeah, that'll work for the moment. Once again, we're just getting things in order here. And one thing I've forgotten to do, which you want to make a religion, is save, because there's not an automatic backup here. So you want to make sure you save early and often and not lose your work. Now, one thing to keep in mind, and we're not doing it here, though I may try it later in layout, is it helps if you have a color of the label close to the color of the symbol to show that they're associated, and that just helps understanding everything. And so yellow and orange isn't hugely close. I could try orange, but let's just leave it that way for the moment. So one thing you can do here is I'm back up here as I can give the highway a shield, you know, like a highway sign, and these aren't really made for it, but notice what happens is that you at least get the I-110 here, but for the most part, if you'll remember, the highway name was actually a long string, so it doesn't really work well with a highway shield. But that's just to show other stuff is available up here that you can apply. You can make it a hollow shield, and then it converts to that. But let's just stick with text. Regular. Let's go to bold. Bold. One of the things about getting involved in you can just loop forever on fooling around with symbology and labels. Meanwhile, I've lost my color background. So let's go back to, let's try the orange and see how that comes out. Might be a little too much. Yuck. So anyway, yeah, you can see the rabbit hole here. you can get pulled into. Let's just do a little bit of yellow there. Yeah, it's a little better. Okay, let's just do the same thing for major faults. We'll see what's in the attribute table. And the name of the fault, so I guess we'll just use name as the field for the label. So let's do that. Go up, major faults, we go to label, and right here the field is name. And notice how it shows it on the fault itself. And now let's go through the same variables. So a couple other things you can fool around with, and maybe I'll show you how to do that. So for instance, in appearance, you can have a particular symbol show at a certain zoom level. So for instance, you might not want it, that way you don't clutter the map when you're zoomed too far out. So notice how the black lines kind of take over. So what you can do is, here's where you might want the faults to start showing, and then you can have it, you're highlighted on major faults, and so you want the visibility to disappear out beyond this zoom level. So notice how they just poof, they're gone, but you go in and there they are. And you can do the same thing with label. So if you go over here to labeling under major faults, you can do the same thing. So you can get rid of the labels at this current zoom level. And so if I zoom out, they disappear along with, of course, the zoom, the faults themselves. And then they come back when you zoom in. So what I want you guys to do is just fool around with the symbology, the colors, choose different symbols, choose different label font types and things like that, and just start getting a feeling for it and try halos of different colors, because it's going to take quite a bit of practice before you start getting an idea of what makes a good map. And a lot of it is aesthetic judgments. So you know, that takes a while to develop. And there's a lot of good ESRI instruction out there that'll help you along. There's a lot of map galleries that ESRI has online, and you start getting an idea of good-looking maps that convey the information that you want to show. And so let's do one more epicenter, and we'll do a customized label. So we've lost where the epicenter is. So what you can do is right-click, and you can just drop down to zoom to layer, and that just centers it right there. So to create our customized label, we're going to start at epicenter and highlight it. And remember that when you highlight a feature class, then all of the tools on the ribbon will act on that particular one highlighted. So let's take a look at the attribute table and see what we want to label it with. So probably magnitude is the most relevant to us right now. And incidentally, when you open a new pane, any of the panes can be moved around and placed where you might want them. So as you move it, notice that these orientation symbols come up here, and you can just attach it where you want. You can attach it to the right or to the top, or you can add it to your main window here. But you can also detach it, and in my case I've got a second monitor, and so I can just put it over there, keep it out of the way, and always be able to refer to it. But for the moment, let's go ahead and just add it to our ribbon. So I'm centering it here, and then it just adds it there. So now we click back on the map, and it's set at magnitude, so we just click the label, and notice how 6.7 comes up. And there's no other information with that, and so in your labels, the odds are that you want to actually add text information to the label to give a little more definition of what that 6.7 means. So we'll do that. So a couple of ways to get there, but we know we want to make a label expression is what it's called. And so we'll just click on this little icon here, which is expression. But you can also do this from the label pane that'll show on our right here. So click on that, and the label pane shows up. We anchor it into place. And so what this does is this gives an expression such that we could say, for instance, magnitude, even put a colon in there, 6.7. So that's what we'll do. We'll just do a real basic one, but you can even do several lines of text. You can add other fields, and so there's a lot of stuff you can do here, but we're going to do a very simple one, and then I'll show you how to learn more about them. So a lot of what you do depends on which particular scripting language you choose, and you've got several here, and maybe if you already know some scripts, you'll be happier. I am lousy at scripts. The two I tend to use are Arcade and VBScript. Arcade is also the standard scripting language for ArcGIS Online, so it helps if you start learning that. So let's just stick with an arcade language for the moment. And then it helps to see some examples, so you can write the code if you just don't know it from learning that particular script. So down here is learn more about label expressions, and I use this all the time, and it comes up in a web page. And so read through this and see what you can do, and then scroll all the way down. It shows you some examples, and then even scroll farther for writing a label expression, and then it gives you expression examples, and this is where we ultimately want to get to, because just seeing an example I think helps quite a bit. So notice in Arcade the syntax is putting the text you want to appear in quotes. So parcel number with a colon, and remember a space, you'll forget that, and then a quote, so that everything that is between those quotes will appear as text. And then you link it to the particular field that that you want it to show up at. So like I said, we're just going to do a simple one, but go on down here, and here's the same one in VB script, same parcel number, and then instead you use the ampersand, the and sign there, and the parcel number is in brackets. And there's other examples down here. So for instance, if you want to have a line break and show something on several different lines, keep going here, and then it shows what you can do for a new line. So text formatting dot new line will give you a whole new line, whereas in VB script it's VB control line feed, and then links you to the next part of the feature. I'm sorry, field that you want to get to. Anyway, read through all that stuff, get an idea, and for just basic stuff, you'll probably refer back to this. In our case, we're going to write, as I said, a very simple one. So let's go back up. So we'll enter in the name, we'll put in magnitude, we'll put in the plus sign, and then it'll act on the field that we want it to act on. So the feature is magnitude, and let's get a space to give us a little room in there. And so in quotes, magnitude, colon, space, and then, oops, a quote, and then remember to put in the plus sign. And the good news here is you can check it out, you can verify, and if you get an error message back, but the expression is valid, so we're pretty happy about that. And then we'll apply. So when you hit apply, it comes out magnitude 6.7, but notice that's on 2 lines, and in some cases when things are crowded you may want it to do that, and you may want to even reduce the type size, but for our purposes it's only 1 point. So let's put it on 1 line, and in this case we go to fitting strategy and stack, and right now it says to stack label, but if we get rid of that it'll show on 1 line, and there we go. And then we can also move that off. Right now we've got a fitting strategy of top right. And so top right actually works for a single point, but I'll show you what else you can do here is you go to position, and at the moment it chooses the best position, and it weighs all the other competing labels, of which there are none here, but sometimes were the magnitude to be over here right on top of a fault, it might interfere with one of the labels there. So you can weight the label such that they don't compete. So in any event, best position here, but for instance you can go to centered on point, and that moves it to the absolute center of the point there, which we don't really want. And once again, go through the various choices and get a feel for what they do. But back to best position. position. So okay, that's all that I'm going to do for labels and symbology for the moment. And in the next video, we will get into editing. And then I think we're going to hope to wrap it up. We'll see what happens here. So thanks. See you in the next video.